concepts into politics, then we can see that high political technologies can actually render political actions in very bad ways. They can make them biased by introducing foreign interests and foreign agendas into these politics. They can make them invisible because they can hide them in the complexity of the apparatus. They can make them unintelligible almost instantaneously because only experts will be able to reconstruct what actually is happening and who is interested in what and who is biased in which way. So that really becomes a very complicated thing in complex high technologies. And they can also render certain political actions entirely unphysical and physically very hard for us to access. And one example is the Vorratsdatenspeicherung. What's that in English, actually? Data retention, yeah. One very nice example is data retention, which is a process entirely unphysical to us because we have no direct possibility to interfere with that in any physical way. And now, if we now remind ourselves of the demand we have stated that politics should be cognitively and physically accessible, and that also political technologies should be cognitively and physically accessible, we can now see that the introduction of high technologies into politics renders them cognitively and physically inaccessible. And that, of course, is a very dangerous situation. And we can also discern two different types of inaccessibilities. One I want to term partial inaccessibility, as it applies only to lay people who are not experts in the technical fields and not able to reconstruct these things on their own without a certain degree of expertise. And another inaccessibility, which is even more dangerous, is full inaccessibility in cases where these technologies are even not accessible by experts anymore. So as a consequence, of course, we have to state that fully inaccessible technologies as really a worst case scenario of entirely uncontrollable and unintelligible technologies and or parts of political actions have to be avoided as deeply dystopian in politics at all costs. And actually dystopian literature for me is always a very good backdrop to analyze these things, because most dystopian scenarios are really concerned with technologies which have become inaccessible and which somewhat determine the political course of life. And one very early dystopian example, would be the automatic doomsday machine, which the Russians have invented in Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, which is inaccessible then once it is initiated, and so on and so forth. So that is the demand which would apply to fully inaccessible technologies. But the thing which we have to be concerned with more narrowly in our daily basis will be partially inaccessible technologies, technologies which are not accessible to the lay public. Of course, they should be avoided too in political actions, but due to this feature of logical malleability, we will not be able to avoid them, and this will just simply happen. And what we have to do then in this case would be to recover the accessibility. And these are largely technical tasks, of course, to say that. To realize when a technology is fully inaccessible is a technical task and can only be done by somebody who knows technology and who knows what's happening and going on there. And also to recover accessibility is also a technical task, because you have to understand this and be able to translate it and to do something against it. And this path of how to do this, how to come to avoidance and restoration, is a concept which I'm trying to develop now, which many of you, of course, do already, but this is now in the context I have developed. And I've termed it counter-development because it's somewhat the development against evil development, so it counters something. And the core concept of counter-development will consist of these three demands. The first demand will be to restore visibility, and that will entail to alarm the lay public about the presence of technologies in politics whenever that is the case, which is really just basically to get visibility of these things in the first place. And that will have to be accompanied by the second demand to restore intelligibility, to enlighten the public about the specific workings of these machines, of these high technologies, of the functions, of the potentials, the dystopian potentials, whenever these are introduced into politics, and how they could actually alter the politics and bias them and do things with them. And then the third demand, which is more controversial, especially among my philosopher colleagues, is that we should also be concerned with restoring the physicality of these things. And namely, countermeasures should be developed to any political technologies which are potentially questionable, to make them accessible again in any case of misuse by any tyrant. So we really would have to supply sabotage devices or sabotage guides to the lay public to allow them to disable features which suppress them in highly technologized politics. And these three demands then directly aim at restoring what we have discerned in the first part as the basic conditions for resistance. If we follow these, then visibility and intelligibility can be restored, and politics will be made cognitively accessible, and physicality can be restored as well to make politics also, again, physically accessible. However, there will be some more, and I haven't gone into these too deeply, but there will be some more demands as well entailed or implied by counter-development. The fourth would, of course, be concerned with these full inaccessibilities, that dystopias have to be destructed, full inaccessibilities have to be pointed out explicitly, and removed if necessary, if nobody acts on them. And another more general demand, of course, would be to raise some sort of general awareness, which is a demand which would more apply to the meta-technical community, people like me or sociologists, historians, politicians of technology, to enlighten the public about the general implications and entanglements of politics and technology and what happens and how inevitable disasters and some developments are when these things happen. For instance, as history has shown, is that technologies which are once introduced in certain types of political actions are never ever being removed again. That's a very disturbing fact, and the public should really be enlightened about the role technology plays in politics, because I do not think that they really realize how devastating they can be within politics. So, and now this all applies to you here in the audience personally very much, because counter-development, if we now say that counter-development is somewhat a necessity, is a necessary thing to guarantee an ongoing access to politics in the high-tech age, because counter-development is the only thing that allows us to restore accessibility and make resistance as the last means to access the social contract, a meaningful concept again, then this is largely your job. I mean, counter-development can only be done by the technical community. The lay public cannot do this. And this renders somewhat the technical community into a social group which has to be engaged in the social struggle over these accessibilities. And what we would probably need would be something, an equivalent to the free independent press in terms of technologists. We would need something like the free independent technologist, who's able to translate what is happening in technologies into understandable concepts to make these things visible. And in addition to what the press does, the press only does this translation thing, the free independent technologists should also provide countermeasures, really physical things to counteract certain high-tech political actions. And as such, from a philosophical point of view, counter-development is really an ethical obligation for every individual technological expert. So that has been my argument largely. I just want to go through it again for you as a reminder now for the discussion. We have stated that political measures have to be physically and cognitively accessible to allow resistance as access to the social contract and worst case scenarios. Then we have seen that high technologies introduce partial or full inaccessibilities into political measures, or are capable of doing so, and thus alter political measures in a very substantial way. And we have then stated that full inaccessibilities, of course, have to be avoided, and partial inaccessibilities have to be removed by counter-development. And by realizing that counter-development really is a technical task, we're also able to state that counter-development is a new ethical duty for the technical community. Okay, so this has been my talk here, my presentation. There's also an article coming up on this topic, counter-development, is forthcoming in the International Journal of Technology, Knowledge and Society, which will appear in, I don't know, February, March sometime. But I can also send you a slightly different version of that. If you're interested, you can just send me an email and I'll send it to you as a PDF. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Sandro. Any questions, comments?
So you say a lot about cognitive things and about the physical things, but what do you think about emotions? I think emotions are really so we must to understand it, or to what we what we have to do with emotions in this shame or German.
What do you think? How technologies manipulate people emotionally, or what do you?
I don't think it's so simple that manipulate who is manipulated and so. And I can say it now, but I think that you're drawing a really interesting pictures, but I don't understand which role have the emotions in this theory. So I think that because of this social life, it's not only with the cognitive things. You not only think, and feeling is not only physical. I think not physical like a touch, but emotional. So on.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would go really deeply into this phenomenology of technologies stuff, which is the philosophical discussion on how we live with technologies and how we actually mix and form a synthesis of. I mean, I know you're a sociologist of technology, but I don't really understand the concept of how to embody this into politics. Maybe we just have to talk about that later. I don't have a picture now.
Okay, I just say it for all because of I think like a iPod is sexy, and so it's not a cognitive thing, and
Okay,
it's really important.
Yeah, you have to explain that to me later. I don't get it now.
Further questions, contributions?
Okay, thank you for your talk. I would like to make some more explicit links to talks that have been made on the first day. You talked about the voting computers. The talk that was given by Rob, I can't pronounce his surname, so I won't do it. And how we need accessibility and visibility. And I think if we think about voting computers and how they actually make the voting itself, the whole vote, inaccessible to some kind and unintelligible for people who don't understand computers. I think that's a very important point. So that's the point where we should oppose such things as voting computers and voting, electronic voting, for example, as well. So that would be, I would totally support your argument there. And there has been another talk on the first day about data retention. So you mentioned data retention already by Ulrich Wiesner, and he was talking about how we give up a lot of freedom with data retention, for example, to gain only a little bit of security. And I think what is the problem here too, what Ulrich pointed out was that most of the politicians don't really understand why they use the technology, and that they use the technology, but they don't really see what they're doing to the public with it. They only have certain aims in their mind, but they don't really see what these aims or what the means they use for it also imply. So that would be another way to support your argument there. But it also points to the fact that, or I would like to point to the fact that we need not only to inform the public, but also the politicians at that point. They make use of political technologies or technology in general, but they don't really see what's happening with this technology or what it implies, all the implications. So I would like to add to your argument that we need to inform the politicians as well. And my last question would be, you said that technology is never neutral. I think we need to use technology as well. So as a means for doing something, it might be neutral, but we use it for different aims. So I wouldn't necessarily say that technology is evil or bad or something, or never neutral, but that the aims we use them for are never neutral. So if we, for example, counter development, you might also term it as hacking, for example. We sort of use the technology for a different aim. So we might have like a left-wing aim, and the politicians might have a right-wing aim, but we use the same technology. So Yeah, I would oppose that because